Welcome back to another very exciting tutorial here at the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. My name is Jesus Ramirez, and you can find me on Twitter at JRFromPTC. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create light wraps in Photoshop. Light wraps, or light spills as they're sometimes called, are a technique that video compositors use to help them create better blends between the background and the foreground. Usually, you would use a program like Adobe After Effects to create a light wrap for video footage. But in this tutorial, we'll of course use Photoshop to apply this technique to photographs. You can think of a light wrap as a way to simulate the ambient light in a scene that will be casted onto the subject by the background. This effect is meant to be very subtle. You may not even notice it, but that's the whole point. It's all those little details that make the biggest difference in the end. The way that we'll create the light wrap is by creating an outline of the foreground, but use the background pixels and then apply it to the subject in our scene. This graphic shows how the layers are going to be laid out. It's all very straightforward. In my second example, I'll show you how to apply the light wrap to a scene where the subject is indoors and in a dark area. I'll also show you how to add ambient color to the foreground so that it blends better with the background. Remember that this tutorial is showing you a technique that could be created and applied in many different ways, and that you may find different blending modes or adjustments that work better for your images. It's more important for you to understand why this effect can help your composites rather than the specific values that I'm going to use. Also, keep in mind that this tutorial is all about light wraps and will disregard other issues that these composites may have. But I do think that these examples do help illustrate the benefits of light wraps. Okay, let's get started with the tutorial. The first thing that you need to do when creating a light wrap is to make a selection out of your subject. In this case, this woman here. Usually you may have a layer mask. In this case, I don't. So I'm simply going to press Control, that's Command on the Mac, and click on the layer thumbnail. But you would click on the layer mask if you had one. So the selection is made around the woman and the area that she's sitting on. In this case, it's not going to make a difference, but you may want to only select the subject of your image. Anyway, so now that we have the woman selected, I'm going to disable the layer by clicking on the eye icon here and clicking on the Venice layer. So we're only looking at the background layer. Then I'm going to go into Select, Modify, Expand. This is going to expand the selection, and I'm going to only expand it by a few pixels. 2 pixels will be okay. You may want to do a few more pixels if you have a larger image. So once I press OK, notice that the selection gets a little bit larger. And then I can press Ctrl J, Command J on the Mac to make a duplicate of that layer. And if I disable the Venice layer, you'll see the result. And what I'm going to do now is once again press Control, Command, and click on the woman thumbnail to make a selection out of the same shape. Again, you may want to click on the layer mask if that's how your subject is being isolated. So now that I have my selection active, I can click on the duplicate layer on this layer 1, then go into Select, Modify, and this time we're going to select Contract. And we're going to contract the selection for about 5 pixels. Again, this could be a little more if you have a larger image. So I'm going to press OK. And notice now my selection is a little bit smaller. And this time I'm just going to press Delete or the backspace key on the keyboard to get rid of those pixels. And I have an outline of my subject. I'm going to press Ctrl D, Command D on the Mac to deselect. And I'm going to click and drag this duplicate layer above my subject, in this case, the woman. And I'm going to double click on it to rename it, and I'll call it Light Wrap. Then I'm going to enable the woman layer, and you'll see the result there. I'm going to set the blend mode to screen, or you can also use linear dodge. Experiment with both and see how they work. So I'll first try screen, then I'm going to enable the Venice layer, the background, and you'll see the result there. Now it's obviously too bright and it's not looking very good. The first step is to convert that into a clipping mask, meaning having the light wrap layer only affect the woman layer. The easiest way to convert a layer into a clipping mask is by selecting it, then pressing Ctrl-Alt-G, Command-Option-G on the Mac. Or you can also hover in between 2 layers and hold the Alt key, that's Option on the Mac, and click. And it does the same thing. So now you see that the light wrap layer only affects the woman layer. Now, this light wrap is a little too sharp. I want it to be a little softer. So I'm going to have to blur this layer. With that layer selected, the light wrap layer, I'm going to go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and 48 pixels is way too much. I'm going to bring that down to 0.1 and just increase it until I find something that I like. So in this case, about 4 pixels is good. I'm just looking at the edges here. I know it's a little too bright in some areas, but we're going to fix that in a moment. And I'm going to press OK. Then I can use the opacity slider to bring down the opacity of this layer. I'm going to click and drag that to the right. And right at about maybe 40% in this case is a good number. So this is before and this is after. If your image requires it, you can create a layer mask and paint with black in areas that you don't want to have affected. For example, maybe the railing here that she's sitting on. Maybe we don't want to apply the light wrap to that. So that's before and that's after. If you got some dark areas like the hair that the effect is too strong, then we can just mask that out and then go into the fade menu. By going into edit, fade, you can bring the opacity on that down and then increase it accordingly until you find something that you are happy with, maybe something like that, and press OK. So this is the before and this is the after. So this light wrap layer helps the composition come together a little more by using light and color that are found in the image so that the subject and the background interact with each other just a little bit better and helps create a more realistic composition. So again, before and after. Now we're going to work on a composition that's very similar. The difference is that we're now in a dark room and having the light wrap set to screen would just be too bright, or linear dodge. Both will be way too bright for that. And by the way, I've already created the light wrap. I used the same technique as I used in the previous example. I just created it in advance so that we could save a little bit of time. So I have my light wrap here. I'm going to put that into a clipping mask. Control-Alt-G, Command-Option-G on the Mac. And the light wrap only affects the dancer now. And as I said, linear dodge and screen are just not going to work. It's going to make the image too bright. We're in a dark environment here. So in this case, I can use soft light and again, bring the opacity down accordingly. And you'll see the difference. That's before and that's after. Another thing that I want you to take a look at is in this example, if I zoom in, you'll see that the light that's coming down hitting on the shirt is bouncing up. And you can see some of that pink here on the gray sweater. That will also be true for some of the environment here. You notice the blue-green wall here. Well, you would expect to see some of that on her shirt, maybe even on her face and the rest of her body, actually. So one of the things that you can do to sort of mimic that effect, similar effect you see here on the sweater, is by taking the background and duplicating it. Control-J, Command-J on the Mac, and move that up to the very, very top. And I'm actually going to zoom out just so you can see what's going on. Then I'm going to go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to blur this up until I lose all detail, but the color is still there. So maybe about 47 pixels in this case, and I'm going to press OK. Then I can create another clipping mask, Control-Alt-G, Command-Option-G in the Mac. Then I can switch the blend mode of this layer to color and bring the opacity way down, maybe all the way to 0, and then increase it accordingly until you see something that you're happy with. In my case, we're going to go to about 25%. I'm going to zoom in just so you could see some of that detail. And if I disable the layer, you see the before and the after. So you see we're starting to get some of those blue grays on this sweater. We're just trying to apply some of that color that's found in the environment onto the subject so that it fits better within that environment. If at this point you think that applying this color layer made you sort of desaturate the image, that's okay. If you want to saturate the image a bit more, then you can create a new adjustment layer and go into the vibrance adjustment layer. Make it into a clipping mask. In this case, you can just click on this icon here if you like. It does the same thing as pressing Control-Alt-G, Command-Option-G, and you can increase the vibrance. So we get a little bit of a stronger color. Is that same blue-green color that sort of makes the environment in this room. Of course, there's a whole lot more that you can do to create more realistic compositions, but in this tutorial, I just wanted to show you these 2 quick examples that you can use to create better compositions in Photoshop. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you learned something new. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. If you enjoyed the tutorial, don't forget to click that like button and share this video with a friend. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Photoshop training channel now. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.